afternoon. Good afternoon and welcome to the Tuesday, June 26, 2018 convening of the Baltimore City Board of Municipal and Zoning Appeals. I guess before our standard addressing of the House rules, I would like to make one observation. That's those of you who are familiar with our proceedings will note that there is one new member of the board. Mr. James Fields is a recent appointee, though still awaiting swearing in. So as of right now is technically a temporary or interim board member, but that is pending his final swearing in. So would like to acknowledge Mr. Fields becoming a part of this body and welcome him aboard. That being said, we can move on to our standard house rules, which are if you have a cell phone, a pager, anything that makes any sort of audible electronic sound, anything that plays a ringtone, a chime, etc., we would ask that at a minimum you please turn those devices to a vibrate only, if not off position, and similarly to the extent that you need to have a conversation with someone, we ask that you please take those conversations out the double doors to your rear. And the reasons for those rules is pretty simple and straightforward. There are a number of microphones which are arrayed around us up here, and those microphones are all very sensitive. They're not only for the purpose of amplification, but they're also for the purpose of recording. And cell phones, conversations, generally noise from the gallery not only interferes with the general conduct of these proceedings, but also interferes with the recording of these proceedings as well. In addition, those of you who are sitting forward of the wall above you, you can see that there are 1, 2, 3 video cameras which are mounted on the wall up there above you, and there are 1, 2 video cameras which are mounted on the wall up here behind us. Those video cameras are all live and they are recording these proceedings. Actually, they are being streamed live right now on the website for the city's cable access channel, as well as videotaped for subsequent rebroadcast on the cable access channel and stored for all posterity on the city's YouTube channel. So cell phones, pagers, conversations, generally noise emanating from the gallery not only disrupts the conduct of these proceedings, but also interrupts and disturbs that videoing capability as well. We will be voting at the end of the day, and you're certainly more than welcome to hang around and enjoy a civics lesson if you so choose. But if you've got other plans for this otherwise splendid late June afternoon, that's certainly understandable. If you take out pen and paper, I can read off the number for the zoning board office, and you can call in the morning and find out how we ruled on your case. That number for the zoning board office is 410-396-4301. Again, 410-396-4301. You will, however, need to wait until you receive the formal written notice of the outcome of your case, which should be forthcoming in about 3 to 4 weeks, before you'll be able to get your permits. And we certainly ask that you please not build in the city of Baltimore without first obtaining all of your proper permits. If you haven't already done so, if you're here in opposition to any case today, we ask that you please sign in on our sign-in sheet being held up now by Mr. Henry. The sign-in sheet allows us generally to know which cases have opposition, but also allows us to know which cases, who needs to receive those aforementioned written notices I just talked about. In addition, if your case gets postponed today, and we do have at least one postponement today, if your case gets postponed today, we need to know who you are and how to contact you to let you know when your case will be going forward. So please, if you haven't already done so, make sure that you've signed in on the signing sheet so that we can keep you abreast of any developments in your case. The procedures for today are the same as they typically are for all of our hearing days. When their cases are called, the applicant will come forward and stand to our left or your right. The opposition, if any, will come and stand forward, come and stand to our right or your left. Once everyone is up here, we'll get you all sworn in, and then we'll first start off with the appellant, who begins the opportunity to present their side of things, their documents, any witness testimony, arguments that they would like the board to consider in support of their position. Once they've concluded their presentation, we'll then turn to the opposition, who'll be given the opportunity to do the same, that is, present their documents, witnesses, arguments, etc. once the opposition, if any, has concluded. We'll then return back to the appellant and give them the opportunity to offer a closing statement, as well as address any points which might have been brought up by their opposition. We won't be going back and forth and necessarily delaying things any longer than is necessary. We will generally be hearing the cases in the order in which they appear on the docket once we first address some preliminary issues. First, as I had said, there is one postponement thus far on our agenda. That is case 2018-178, 1418 through 1420 South Carey Street. That case has been postponed and will not be heard today. If you're here on that case, just make sure that you've signed in on the signing sheet, and we'll let you know when that case will be going forward, but it won't be going forward today. Next up on the agenda are those cases which are on our consent docket. These are cases where the zoning board staff has reviewed the files in these matters, and the board has determined that we have the ability to approve these appeals on a consent basis. We're going to call the consent cases together as a group, so as I read them off, please come forward. Try to stay in the order in which you're called. Once everyone is up here, we'll get you all sworn in as a group, and then we'll call each case in turn. You'll be given the opportunity at that time to have any information that you would like to have added to the record at that point. First case on the consent agenda is 2017-296, 612 through 616 Washington Boulevard, Bill Walter. After that will be 2018-151, 23, you'll come forward right there, Mr. Hurd. Thank you. After that will come 2018-151, 2301 North Monroe Street. It's Herbert Burgunder. After that will be 2018-183, 4202 Greenway, Bruce Doak. And 2018-184, 12 South Patterson Park Avenue, Joseph Woolman. 2018-188, 1624 Belt Street, Matt Knofel. 2018-190, 3441 Chestnut Avenue, Ian Carmichael. And then 2018-192, 1645 North Calhoun Street, Essence Smith. We've got one other, 2018-128, 6301 Efficiency Way, Rajan Tripathi. Call that one again, 2018-128, 6301 Efficiency Way, Rajan Tripathi. Okay. All right, if all those intending to give testimony in these matters will raise their right hands to be sworn, please.
Do you swear or affirm under the penalty of perjury that the answers that you give and the statements that you make will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
All right, calling the first case on the consent agenda, 2018-296, 612 through 616 Washington Boulevard. Counsel, can you identify yourself and your client for the record, please?
Yes, Abraham Hurdle on behalf of 612 through 616 Washington Boulevard. With me is Bill Walters. Mr. Walters.
It would just,
And Mr. Hurdle, we have this as an application to post a business identification sign at the premises. Is that correct?
That is correct.
All right. Mr. Tissot, anything on behalf of the planning department?
Yes, sir. This property is located within Ridgely's Delight Historic District, which is a locally designated district. We recommend approval of the appeal subject to receipt of an authorization to proceed issued by our Commission for Historic and Architectural Preservation.
Okay. And Mr. Hurdle, is that condition offered by the planning department acceptable to your client?
Yes, it is. We've been working with CHAP as well as the neighborhood group, and everything seems to be going well.
All right. Anything further at this time?
Nothing further.
All right. Zoning board staff, having previously reviewed your application, we determined that there is sufficient information to approve your appeal. Good luck,
Thank you very
gentlemen.
much. Have a good day.
Take care. Next up, 2018-151, 2301 North Monroe Street, Herbert Burgunder.
Good afternoon.
Afternoon, Mr. Burgunder. We have this as an application to use the premises as offices. Is that correct?
Yes.
All right. Mr. Tiso, anything for the planning department?
Yes, sir. We understand that there's some concern from the community about the potential impact for retail uses as part of the neighborhood commercial establishment category generally, and we recommend that the application be approved subject to the condition that the office use of the property is the only non-residential use authorized, and that no non-office accessory use is permitted.
Okay. And Mr. Burgunder, is that condition of the planning department acceptable to your client?
Yes, we worked with the neighborhood association to come to that agreement. We were accepting of the condition.
Great. Anything further at this time that you'd like to have added to the record?
Nothing further.
All right. Zoning board staff, having previously reviewed your application, we have determined that there is sufficient information to approve your appeal.
Thank you very much.
Good luck. Next, 2018-183, 4202 Greenway.
Bruce Stoke with David Artitz, the owner, please.
Okay. State the owner's name again.
David Artitz,
Can you spell it?
Art, A-R-D-I-S.
Okay. And Mr. Doak, we have this as an application to construct a one-story side addition at this location. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Mr. Tiso, anything for the planning department?
No, sir.
Okay. Mr. Doak, anything further you would like to have added to the record at this time?
No, sir.
Zoning board staff, having previously reviewed the application, we have determined that there is sufficient information to approve the appeal.
Thank you very much.
Take care. Next, 2018-184, 12 South Patterson Park Avenue, Joseph Wallman.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman.
Afternoon, Mr. Wallman. We have this as an application to subdivide the lot and construct 9 3-story and 4-story single-family dwellings at this location. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Mr. Tiso, anything for the planning department?
Yes, sir. This is a proposal for a subdivision which was heard by the Planning Commission in their hearing on June 21st. We recommend approval of that application subject to the condition that the proposed development is completed in accordance with that subdivision plan approved by the Planning Commission.
All right. Mr. Wallman, is that condition offered by the planning department acceptable to your
Yes, it
client?
is.
Okay. Anything further you would like to add to the record?
I believe these were added to the file late last week, but there are 3 letters of support we'd like to add for the record. Thank you.
Okay. Letters from Butchers Hill, Councilman Z. Cohen, and from a Leora Herman. Anything else?
Nothing else.
Okay. Zoning board staff, having previously reviewed the application, we have determined that there is sufficient information to approve the appeal.
Thank you.
Good luck. Next, 2018-188, 1624 Belt Street, Matt Nofel.
Good afternoon.
Afternoon, sir. We have this as an application to construct a second-floor rear addition and rooftop deck at this location. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Tiso, anything for the planning department?
No, sir.
All right. And Mr. Nofel, anything further you would like to have added to the record at this time?
No, sir.
All right. Zoning board staff, having previously reviewed your application, we have determined that there is sufficient information to approve the appeal.
Thank you. Have a
Good
good
luck.
afternoon.
You too. 2018-190, 3441 Chestnut Avenue, Ian Carmichael.
You don't know.
Afternoon, sir. You are Mr. Carmichael?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and Mr. Carmichael, we have this as an application to construct a 2-story rear addition at this location. Is that correct?
Yes.
Mr. Tiso, anything further?
No, sir.
All right. And Mr. Carmichael, anything you would like to have added to the record at this time?
No, thank you, sir.
Zoning board staff, having previously reviewed the application, we have determined that there is sufficient information to approve the appeal. Good luck. Take care. Last, 2018-192, 1645 North Calhoun Street, Essence Smith.
Yes.
Afternoon. You are Ms. Smith?
Yes.
Okay. You can come forward and bend those microphones down a little bit if you need to. All right. Ms. Smith, we have this as an application to use the property known as 1622 North Carey Street as a recreation center. Is that correct?
Yes.
All right. Mr. Tiso, anything for this planning department?
Yes, this property is locally designated as a landmark, the Frederick Douglass High School. We recommend approval of the application be subject to receiving an authorization to proceed from the Commission for Historic and Architectural Preservation.
Thank you. All right. And Ms. Smith, is that condition of the planning department acceptable to you?
Yes.
All right. And is there anything further you'd like to have added to the record at this time?
No.
Okay. Zoning board staff, having previously reviewed the application, we have determined that there is sufficient information to approve the appeal.
Thank you.
Good luck. Calling one more time. 2018-128, 6301 Efficiency Way, Rajan Tripathi. All right. Next, we will address the remainder of our docket, which will include cases where opposition is signed in. And frequently, we found that opposition is the result of a lack of communication or miscommunication among the parties. And it can be useful to offer the parties an opportunity to have a dialogue amongst themselves to see if they can resolve any dispute they may have. Obviously, if there are two sides who are engaged in a dispute and they come forward and ask the board to resolve their dispute, one of those two sides is bound to go away disappointed with the result. And this is your opportunity to avoid that unhappy fate. I'm going to read off the cases where opposition has signed in and ask the parties, and when I do, you can just stand where you are. I'll ask the parties if there has been any dialogue between them and if they would like to have a dialogue or continue that dialogue now. You are not obligated to take the opportunity to speak with one another, but we do certainly encourage and appreciate it. First case where we have opposition that's signed in is 2018-159, 3501 Dillon Street, Stephen Klein. Okay. And folks, has there been dialogue amongst the parties here?
I understand that, I represent the applicant in this, and I understand that there has been several conversations.
Okay. Any desire to take a last shot at it before we start it up?
I think we certainly would be happy to. I'm not sure that it would be productive.
Okay, have a seat. We'll call you in turn. Next, 2018-189, 409 Charter Oak Avenue, David Caravan. Calling that one again, 2018-189, 409 Charter Oak Avenue, David Caravan.
Sandra Thacker. Is Sandra Thacker in the room?
Oh, they might be out in the hallway, Paul. Okay, great. And did someone else just sign in in case?
She signed in for 180 for the brewery.
Okay. 2018-180, 1900 through 1920 East Lombard Street. Okay. And ma'am, you signed in opposition to this case?
We are in favor of the brewery, but there's no parking.
Okay, would you like to have an opportunity to Okay, all right, yeah. Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Reposado, for making that clarification. You don't need pistols at dawn. All right, calling the first case, 2018-125, 2000 through 2006, North Forest Park Avenues, 5201 through 5205, Muth Avenues, and 3 descriptive lots, all Caroline Hecker.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. Caroline Hecker, Rosenberg, Martin, Greenberg, on behalf of the applicant. We have a handful of folks joining us up here. I'm joined by my colleague, Mr. Williams, who you know. Dave Eberhardt is the owner of the subject properties. Jennifer Leonard is with Dewberry, she's our engineer, and Tom Rusin is with Royal Farms, which is the applicant in this matter.
Okay. Ms. Hecker, this is an application to construct a gas station, 8 dispensers with 6 pumps, 4,637 square feet of convenience store and outdoor dining with 55 square feet of identification signs with 25-foot high freestanding identification sign. Is that correct?
That's almost precise. It's 16 fueling positions, not 6, and it's 1 identification sign that's 50 square feet. I'm not sure where the 55 came from, but.
Okay, so we'll make that 50 and change that to 16.
16 fueling positions.
Stations.
Right. It's 8 pumps, each has 2 fueling positions.
Gotcha. 8 pumps. All right, all those intending to give testimony in this matter, please raise your right hands to be sworn. Thank you, Mr. Williams.
Do you swear or affirm under the penalty of perjury that the answers that you give and the statements that you make will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
All right, and do we have staff reports?
I have nothing.
Mr. Tiso, anything for the planning department?
This project was reviewed through the Site Plan Review Committee. We'd recommend, if the board approves it, to make it conditional to adhering to the plans approved by Site Plan Review.
All right. And Ms. Hecker, is that condition offered by the planning department acceptable to your client?
Yes, it is.
All right. Why don't you tell us about what we've got here?
All right, this is an application for a new Royal Farms store, a gas station and convenience store. It'll be located near the intersection of Windsor Mill and Forest Park over on the west side of town. Mr. Williams has handed up a folder full of exhibits that I'll walk through with you. The first thing that you'll see in the file is an aerial photograph showing the properties in question. The site is made up of 9 lots. They're all improved right now either with former residential properties. There's one auto repair shop. It's roughly, if you're looking at the image, these properties in this general area on the plan. This here is the intersection with, this is Windsor Mill here, this is Forest Park going this way, and there's a BP gas station that's located right at the immediate corner of the intersection there. The property is zoned C2. It was rezoned as part of the comprehensive rezoning through Transform Baltimore. Mr. Eberhardt, who's present here today, owns the property. He's a long-term property owner, born and raised in the Franklin Town community over here in this part of town. As I said, we're proposing to redevelop the site for a Royal Farms gas station and convenience store. I've included in the file that you have in front of you the site plan showing the proposed layout of the site, a landscaping plan, elevations, a signage plan, and renderings of the proposed building. I'll walk through them briefly. I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have. But the site plan you'll see shows the gas canopy fronting along Forest Park. The convenience store is located in the rear of the property. It has access on Muth Avenue, which is a very small road located between the BP gas station and the Royal Farms site, and it has one entrance directly onto Forest Park. It is a rather large site. It's 1.79 acres in size, so it's big enough that we can fit the gas station, the convenience store, the required, plenty more than the required number of parking spaces all on there without needing any variances from the bulk or height yard regulations. And as Mr. Tiso indicated, the project has been through the Site Plan Review Committee, and there is in the file a copy of the stamped plan that SPRC approved. The variances that we're requesting relate to the signage that's proposed, and I'll go into them in a little bit of detail, just so that you're aware of what we're doing. We have, as I mentioned, a 25-foot tall freestanding sign. It has a sign face of 50 square feet. We're also proposing three directional signs that are 4 feet tall located at the entrances. And the canopy, gas canopy sign over the gas pumps themselves. The signs are generally consistent with other signage that's been approved for Royal Farms under the new zoning code. The signage standards are much more restrictive, and so these certain variances are required. We've also done extensive community outreach on this dating back to 2015 before the property was rezoned. We started meeting with the Forest Park Action Council, the Dickeyville Community Association, the Franklin Town Community Association, and I think the fact that no one's here today is a testament to the work that we've done with them. The sense I have candidly from the many, many meetings that we attended with them was that they generally like the idea of a Royal Farms, but because there's already an existing BP station that has been a member of their community for a while, they were sort of hesitant to take a position that might be perceived as being competitive to the BP. So they have decided to just sort of sit this out and not take a position one way or the other.
Where's the BP located?
It's right at the corner. It's right on the intersection of Forest Park and Windsor Mill. That's it, yes. That's a really small site, but it's been a gas station for a really long time. So the Royal Farms site obviously is much bigger, and we believe will be a very successful gas station there. With regard to the legal standards, I've handed out an outline that sort of goes through the various legal standards that are required for the board to consider in approving a conditional use. The gas station portion is a conditional use, subject to zoning board approval. The size of the site, as I've said, it's 1.79 acres in size. It's located along the Forest at Park Avenue corridor. With regard to the resulting traffic patterns and the adequacy of off-street parking and loading, we're providing quite a few more parking spaces than are required. There are 51 parking spaces shown on the plan. Only 4 are required. It is, as we understand it, a very heavily trafficked intersection. That's part of the reason Royal Farms wants to be here, candidly, is that, you know, gas stations and convenience stores generally don't attract new trips. They pick up trips that are already on the road. And since this is a heavily trafficked intersection, Royal Farms thinks it's an ideal site. But what we've heard from the community is that that intersection at Windsor Mill and Forest Park really is a very difficult intersection. There's a bus stop. If you look through the file a little bit further towards the back, there is a street view photograph of the BP station, and you can see there's a bus stop that's located right in front of the BP station. And evidently what happens a lot is that the bus will pull through the traffic light, but then there's not enough room in that little cutout for it to pull out of the traffic lane, and so it just sort of stops and blocks traffic crossing the intersection, What Royal Farms is proposing to do, and we've been working with DOT on this, is to dedicate a 37-foot wide strip across the front of our site, which will allow the creation of an acceleration lane, deceleration lane along our frontage. It'll give the bus a place to pull over and continue going forwards without blocking the intersection. And we think that really will create an improved condition. And since our site is large enough to do this, we think this is a good a good thing for everyone, frankly. The community has been pretty pleased with that, understanding that the intersection itself is challenging to begin with. The development of the site and the proposed use is not expected to impair the present or future development of the area. It's zoned C2. The gas station is sort of consistent with that commercial corridor type use. And Mr. Eberhard, who continues to own other properties in the area, would testify that this is really something that will benefit the other commercial properties in the area as well. The site's located near a broad mix of uses. In addition to residential uses, there's also the hospital. It was the former Kernan Hospital, Gwynn Park, the Forest Park Apartments. There are single-family homes that are close by. But what there isn't is a convenience store type operation, and the Royal Farms really can add something to the community there. Royal Farms often function in neighborhoods where there aren't other grocery components as a place that folks can go for sort of basic, eggs, milk type groceries. This is located in a healthy food priority area, formerly known as a food desert. There's a map showing that in the file as well. And we think having the Royal Farms there will really add options for the folks both who live in the community and who use the hospital that's close by, which is open, 24/7. And providing services like this in the area really will be beneficial to both people who live there and people who work there and people who visit there. With regard to the accessibility of the premises for emergency vehicles, it's been through review by the Site Plan Review Committee, and the fire department has reviewed it as part of that process. It's a large enough site that it's not going to create any accessibility issues. Likewise with light and air, it's a very large site, and for a 4,600 square foot store and a gas canopy, it's not going to impede the access of light or air for anyone around it or on the property. There are adequate public facilities to serve the proposed use. There are no cultural or historic landmarks close by, although the Kernan Hospital, I believe, is a landmark. And having this type of amenity and services close to the hospital should be a benefit to them as well. The use of the property as a gas station and convenience store is consistent with the city's master plan. It creates additional employment opportunities, and it enhances the availability of services to folks who live in the area. It's not located in an urban renewal plan, and as I said, it meets all the other standards of the code with regard to the fact that it doesn't need any variances for the development of the site itself. With regard to the signage variances, there is a rather steep slope across Forest Park Avenue, that creates the need for the larger identification sign. If you're coming southbound down Forest Park, there's a big slope there, and so we're requesting a slight variance to allow a slightly bigger sign than what would be permitted. The directional signs that we're requesting aren't specifically called out in the zoning code, so we've identified them as something that we're seeking approval for. Although I don't really know that they necessarily require variances, they're just not identified in the zoning code at all. And the canopy sign is slightly bigger. If you're treating it as a canopy, this is another sort of unusual thing with our new zoning code that talks about canopy signs, but I think what it really is envisioning are like awnings that come off of buildings, providing shade, and this is sort of a different kind of canopy, but if this is a canopy in that sense, it's a larger size sign than would otherwise be permitted. But again, it makes the property visible. It only has frontage on one main street, and will allow people to see the store as they're coming and going, particularly since it's set back from the intersection. This represents a private investment of over $3 million. It'll create approximately 45 full-time and part-time jobs, as well as 75 construction jobs. And again, with the food concept in the convenience store, really will add an amenity to the neighborhood. So for these reasons, we request that you approve the application. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Any questions?
I just have one. Is it intended to operate 24/7?
Yes, it is. And again, because the hospital is located right there, there's a lot of, people coming and going, shift changes, people visiting the hospital. We think having the store open and certainly the gas station as well, 24/7 is appropriate. And we haven't, candidly, we haven't received any negative feedback on that with the community.
Anything further? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good luck. All right, calling the next case, 2018-133, 1214 Utah Place, Nate Brettel. Good afternoon, Mr. Brettel.
Good afternoon.
All right, sir, we have this as an application to use the premises for 23 dwelling units, is that correct?
That's correct. There is also some office space, which is not really subject to this appeal, that I'll mention.
All right. If all those intending to give testimony in this matter can raise their right hands to be sworn.
Yes.
Do we have staff reports?
Yes. First, we have a little bit of confusion. We have a letter dated June 6th from the Bolton Hill Community Association indicated that they voted to support the lot size and parking variances. We also have another letter dated June 6th from the Bolton Hill Community Association, and they write that due to the late notice, our zoning committee has briefly reviewed the project and believes it may have merit, but our community members have not had a chance to review it at all and are unaware of the appeal or the project in question. Therefore, our board is not in a position to render an opinion at this time, and as such must oppose the appeal until we have a further understanding of its impact.
I can clarify that.
Mr. Tiso?
We know that this property had come before the board in 2008 and was approved at that time for 20 units, though the land use was not established. This is also within the Bolton Hill locally designated historic district, and we recommend approval subject to receiving an authorization to proceed issued from our Commission for Historic and Architectural Preservation.
Thank you. All right, and Mr. Brettel, are those conditions offered by the planning department acceptable to your client?
They are.
All right. Why don't you tell us about what's being presented here, and also if you want to address the confusion from the apparently conflicting letters submitted by the Community Association in this case.
Absolutely. So first of all, this is a Nate Brettel, AB Associates. I'm a planning consultant here with Pat Grace, who is one of the two owners as well as the developer of the property. This is a very exciting project which involves renovating this large historic structure on Utah Place and Landvale Street, directly across the street from the Francis Scott Key statue, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with. It's a building that has sat vacant for the past 26 years. Prior to that, it was used as the Key Circle Hospice. So as many of these buildings, similar from the outside structures, were single-family dwellings or apartment buildings. This was actually used as a 90-unit or 90-bed hospice from the around approximately 1870 up until the early 1990s. Since then, it's been vacant, and the proposal is to do a historic tax credit renovation, both CHAP, state, and federal, if they should receive them tax credits. Use the property as 23 dwelling units as well as 3 office spaces. The office space being a permitted use, there would be 3 large spaces along Utah that would serve as the office space. The density in the underlying zoning code allows 20 units. The reason that we're asking for 23 is there's multiple reasons. One being the size of the structure. There's approximately 23,000 square feet of floor area above ground. As a 3-story structure, as you move towards the rear of the property and the grade drops, it's actually 4 stories in the back, and which is much larger than even other structures on similarly sized lots. When Pat purchased the property, I know he had his architect look at it regardless of zoning and say, what is the proper use for this? And 23 units is what came up. We brought that to the Community Association back in May. As you notice, this appeal has been postponed several times so we could address the community. We had several meetings, or 2 meetings, with the Bolton Hill Zoning Committee for several hours where any number of issues were worked out. To address the letter, the June 6th letter opposing it was actually dated June 6th. We were before this board agreed to postpone until this date. On June 21st, last Thursday, had a meeting with approximately 30 residents and 11 board members, and I guess they just didn't change the date on the letter. And they voted 10-1 to support the application, and I think it was a very fruitful community process. And we'd urge you to approve the variances. One, for lot area, it's approximately 12%. Again, the need for that variance is due to, one, the size of the structure, the configuration of the structure on the lot, as well as the historic nature of the building. This is in a local CHAP district. Mr. Grace here is an expert at these types of historic preservation, adaptive reuse projects, and I'll let him mention a couple of the other ones. And the community is in full support of keeping the building. There's certain things that could be done to alter the structure that may change the need for variances, but that's not our plan. I don't think the city would support that, and that also speaks to the parking variance. We plan on providing at least 6 parking spots in the back. Some of that is yet to be determined because there was some site grade issues as well as a large sinkhole that occurred last week. So until some of that stuff, we can't provide an actual solid number, but we'll ask for 6 spaces and a variance for the rest. If we weren't seeking a variance for the parking, this project would absolutely qualify for the historic structure parking exemption, which I know another project in Bolton Hill just recently received. But since we're before the board, we would ask for that parking variance. I believe the community support includes the parking variance, and I'll let Pat say a few things unless you have any questions.
Not this time, but we may, so stay close.
Yeah, so the big thing is we're not increasing.
You can identify yourself.
I'm sorry, Patrick Grace. I'm with Trademark Properties. I'm the developer. So we're not changing the footprint of the building. That's the most important thing. We're not putting any additions on or anything like that. We're using the existing building as it is. We do nothing but historic renovations. So part of the reason for the 23 units is we have to leverage the existing walls within the building. We can't really take down walls or add a bunch of walls where there's historic trim and things like that. So like Nate said, that was sort of 23 was what we came to that basically is the best use for the building as it stands right now. We've done similar properties at 7 West Mulberry Street, 505 Park Avenue, 803 Cathedral Street. We've completed over 350 units in the city over the last 15 years successfully.
And one more thing I think is worth noting is that throughout the community process, I think there was a little bit of concern or trepidation about the office space, and the community suggested possibly adding additional dwelling units. But from our perspective, we thought it was important to conform as much as possible to what the underlying zoning would allow. And I don't know that we share the same concerns. We're about 2 blocks north and west of State Center, and I think that there's plenty of small, sort of locally based uses that would love to be in this. It's an absolutely beautiful building, and it will look a lot better when Pat and his partner are finished with it.
All right. Any questions?
No.
All right. Anything further? Thank you very much, John.
Thank you.
Thank you.
(2018-169) 4111 West Belvedere Avenue. Hal Arnold. Again, 2018-169, 4111 West Belvedere Avenue. (2018) that's one. That one's postponed. 2018-179, 2223 Maryland Avenue, Nate Prettle. All right, Mr. Berry. We have this as an application to expand a neighborhood commercial establishment. Is that correct?
That's correct.
All right. If all those intending to give testimony in this matter would please raise their right hands to be sworn.
Do you swear or affirm under the penalty of perjury that the answers that you give and the statements that you make will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
All right. Do we have staff reports? Mr. Tisa?
The Department of Planning has no objection to approval of the application as it relates to the proposed use of the lower level and rear addition to the existing structure and the separate carriage house structure on the property together as neighborhood commercial establishment, provided that the approval, if granted, is subject to the condition that the proposed permanent canopy or roof over the existing courtyard area and all signage for the commercial establishment are installed in accordance with plans approved by Department of Planning.
All right, thank you. Mr. Berry, are those conditions offered by the planning department acceptable to your clients?
Yes, they are.
Why don't you tell us about what's being proposed here?
Okay, the application concerns a property that's been before the board twice before. Initially, back in December, there was an initial approval to convert the front building into a neighborhood commercial use. And there was a subsequent application to use the carriage house in the back, which was a former plumbing supply use for neighborhood commercial, and that was disapproved. And I think we were not involved with that, although the applicant, Lane Harlan, and was. And I want to go through some history as to why we're back and why we think the board should ideally extend its original approval from December. As I understood it, the concern was a precedent of allowing a single neighborhood commercial use for a garage, carriage house, however you want to characterize it, even though it was clearly, in my opinion, a commercial structure and used as such for many, many years. But we understood the reservation and concern about precedent. So working with the city in some respects and also the zoning administrator, we decided to file a new application which in effect would designate the entire structure, both the front structure already designated and the back structure, essentially as one entity for neighborhood commercial. The use itself that is proposed by Ms. Harlan is as a restaurant under the conditional use standards for the neighborhood commercial use. The courtyard is indicated by planning, is proposed to be enclosed, essentially linking the two, the prior use and approved use and this new use. And there's a long history for this property that unfortunately brought us to this point, which is of no one's making, but it was an honest mistake. This property is not zoned commercial, and however was proposed to be commercial under Transform Baltimore. At the literally 11th hour, for reasons unbeknownst to the neighborhood association, it was changed to office residential for 3 blocks of Maryland Avenue. That is in the process at the request of the city councilman, Robert Stokes, to change back to a commercial operation. That bill was introduced. It will probably begin hearings in August and September. But in the meantime, Ms. Harlan and her application, they're anxious to get started in sort of renovating the building and using it, hopefully with the board's approval today. The city has had also prior approvals, in a sense, for this use. The state legislature 2 years ago approved a liquor licenses for this particular area of Maryland Avenue, which the neighborhood association would like to revitalize with new entertainment uses. And so there were specific exemptions granted for, one was for this property to be approved for a new license. And that approval took place
August of last year.
August of last year, and has been waiting for this approval. Had perhaps the previous person working on this, we would have had, it would have been applied for under, before Transform Baltimore went into effect, but due to some miscommunication, it was not done, and so we're here today to ask the board's approval for the neighborhood commercial. We have representatives from the neighborhood association in support of this application. We think that I can run through all the standards that the board previously approved as finding the previous use in the front part of the building met, and I'd be glad to go through those, and certainly we're here to answer any questions that the board might have. We have plans that were submitted to the board staff that show the conceptual approval of how the courtyard and the new building and restaurant would operate.
Okay, if I got this correctly, the structure, it's like sort of almost like a dome that would be, or maybe it's a couple of domes that would go over the courtyard to connect the building with the carriage house.
That's correct.
And those, but that would just be like a roof, that wouldn't be.
That's right.
All right. And it, so there are no walls or anything like that to go along with that?
Well, the courtyard is actually has two brick walls on either side. This is a corner property, and there are two brick walls that basically are, one's facing the street, the other one faces the adjoining property. So in fact, it's going to be enclosed.
And what's the purpose of those domes? Or rather, connecting the two?
Okay, why don't we have Ms. Harlan introduce herself?
Sure. Hi, my name is Lane Harlan. So the purpose of the domes is to sort of weatherize the space and bring it into being like a one single fluid space, so people can flow between, but also feel some of the air outside, but not get rained on.
And can you describe your previous experience?
Sure.
In this area?
So we're actually in the neighborhood of Remington. We started our first business there almost 6 years ago. And so we now have two businesses in the neighborhood of Remington, just a few blocks from this property. Our restaurant is called Clavel. It's been there for 3 years now. We employ about 50 people, mixed part-time and full-time. And what we'd like to do is another restaurant and make it so that the community members can sort of walk up 23rd Street and kind of bridge the gap between that edge of Remington and into Old Goucher.
So I'm recalling the prior case, Mr. Berry, the carriage house had been used for the storage of carriages that were, I guess, that belonged to the owner of the main house. And what was the commercial use in the main structure?
Oh, let's see. I think there were offices. Let me see. The records that I saw is that the carriage house was used as a plumbing supply office. There were 6 dwelling units and offices in the main building. I saw it. That's all that I think I have.
Okay.
On that. I mean, again, we were not involved in the original board's approval of the neighborhood commercial for the front building, but I do think it's appropriate to have the entire building, which will function, and we can have Ms. Harlan talk more about that as a commercial entity to be under one approval rather than 2 separate approvals. Until, of course, the zoning changes, which we hope, but we can't guarantee at this point.
Sure.
So are this vaulted roof, is that removable?
So well, it is removable.
Ideally, if we have the money, it would be a retractable situation. Otherwise, it would be something that would be partially covering the courtyard with cables in different corners. You've seen the sort of stretch.
Canvas-like material?
Yeah, that's one option. The other is the dome option, which would
It's
be
like a
retractable.
hard, clear plastic.
Retractable if possible, and then there's going to be an awning on one side that's going to cover part of it that goes from the carriage house to the larder, which is going to be a business on the adjoining side of the courtyard. So there's a few options, but it will be ideally retractable depending on the weather.
It's like a weather-proofed communal area, basically, that we're.
The whole courtyard would be tables and basically join the 2 businesses that have been approved in the front and the carriage house. It will all be a communal area where their businesses will pass through.
And we were approved for a FIG grant, a facade improvement grant. And they approved us for $7,500 to landscape, and it goes towards putting on the awnings and stuff like that.
Mr. Barry, is it, I guess it's your, or tell me, is it your position that this covering, I'll just call it the covering, is a permanent covering so that it makes this one space? And I'm hearing it, it's not, maybe not be permanent?
Well, the design's not finalized, and I recognize that there is a provision in neighborhood commercial that restricts outdoor activities. It's a provision which I would hope to have changed by the city council at some point, because I think it ought to be left up to the board's discretion rather than an outright prohibition, frankly, but that's a matter for another day. They have to design it, and again, this we would see as an interim step, but it's an important step to allow them to proceed. Once the property is rezoned, ideally this fall, then of course there's no prohibition at that point. So we want to design it in a way that that allows for both possibilities, certainly. Also, I just want to give the board 3 copies, sorry, not more, of the facade improvement grant approval from Baltimore Development Corporation. Ms. Harlan has been working with on this renovation plan.
So in your opinion, what would not be sufficient to make this one building? I mean, would one 2x4 stretch across there make it one building?
No, I think having a covering that is something other than just a tent, but something that is clearly supported. I can think of certainly a restaurant that, I don't know if it came to the board or not, but it's very similar that I represented in Fells Point, where a very large mechanical structure, timbers supported, retractable garage door that was opened up the courtyard in nice weather, and frankly 50 or 60% of the time was enclosed, either because of cold weather or rain or whatever. And Baltimore has a temperate climate that ought to take advantage of it. But if it's a permanent enough structure, not just somebody putting up a Sam's Club tent, I think that would qualify. It's going to require a building permit, structural approval by the city. As you heard, the planning department will be interested in it. We hope that if the zoning takes place, that issue goes away, but I think it would be fair enough to have the board approve it, given the concept plans you have. I hope you wouldn't put restrictions on it to any extent, but if the board has to do that now because of the neighborhood commercial, I would understand that. But give us some leeway, certainly.
Just to be more clear about the structure, when we had talked about having something more permanent, there's 2 walls. We were talking about trusses going from one to the other.
Right.
That is like a dome that could be, ideally, like I say, if we had the money, it could be retractable. But either way, it would cover like a dome. It would be open maybe on either end, but it would be a truss, rainbow sort of truss from one wall to the other.
Is the plan to move forward with this, or wait for the possible rezoning so you don't have to do this?
Well,
We would like to do this because it's just, it's nice to weatherize an area for year-round use.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, in answer to your question from earlier, in the prior appeal that was approved, in the city record, we have a BMZA appeal from 1965 for that front portion, to use the property as the basement portion for offices, custom drapery shop, and storage of materials for that drapery shop. On Maryland Avenue, there are a lot of those kind of semi-quasi basements where they're like a step walk down. So.
All right, and what is the approved use as of now of the Carrots House?
Well, the carriage house is vacant, so I'm not sure there is an approved use. A prior approved use, I think, was a plumbing supply.
There's also a graphic design studio before that, and then just before us, it was a bicycle shop, so it's been commercial.
I think it meets the standards for the neighborhood commercial. I think the approval of the use itself would meet the standards for conditional uses. Certainly, the rezoning, I would add, is being introduced, was introduced at the request of the neighborhood association, which wants to go back to the anticipated commercial zoning of that block rather than the office residential zoning, which again changed at the request of, we think, a individual within the Charles Village community who basically wasn't communicating that to the neighborhood association, in this case Old Goucher.
And is the intent here to, I guess, use the approved use of the house, extend that to the carriage house by way of erection of the roof to make it all one structure?
Yeah, Ms. Harley should describe how the interplay between the various tenants are going to do, if you can.
Okay. So the original vision for the spot is I have a lease on the whole bottom layer, and two really great friends. One's his name's Chris. He works with me at Clavel, but he's amazing at coffee, and he's always wanted to own a coffee shop. And then my friend Helena, who is a chef, wanted to have a larder, kind of like a daytime lunch counter. And so I basically negotiated the lease for the whole space, and then I'm subleasing parts so that we can all like provide each other, like we do different things, but we can bring people in together to sort of explore, have lunch at the larder, stay, have dinner at our restaurant, go grab a coffee at Sophomore Coffee. And so we, through talking with the community, of course, like went in this game plan together to make this building that is it's pretty much just been vacant in a lot of the areas, and turn it into like a really vibrant, lively place that's really beautiful in the community and walkable from other businesses up the street. We really did want to go into Old Goucher before we found Clavel. Actually, we had been looking in the neighborhood because it's a really beautiful neighborhood, and it just happened that we found Clavel on the other side in Remington first. But we had been talking with the Old Goucher Community Association years back, before 2015, just looking to see what we could do, what we could spark in the neighborhood to sort of, make people not afraid to walk over there and to feel like, oh no, like this has beautiful architecture. This is a really great historic neighborhood. It just has a lot of empty spaces currently. I don't know if did that. Okay.
All right. Anything further at this point?
No, I would reiterate, to the extent that you're concerned about the covering, that if you would approve it today, subject to the planning department, I'm sure they'll take the design both aesthetically and with whatever else you would want to add to the condition. But we hope you would approve it today. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good luck. Two 2018-186, 3301 Elgin Avenue, Adam Carballo. Okay. Mr. Caballo, we have this as an application to increase the number of dwelling units from 8 to 12. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Gentlemen, if you would please raise your right hands to be sworn. Thank you.
Swear or affirm under the penalty of perjury that the answers that you give and the statements that you make will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Yes.
Thank you. Do we have staff reports?
For planning, we are ordinarily concerned about significant degrees of variance for properties, residential uses specifically. In this case, this building is uncharacteristic for its R5 district setting in that it's larger than the majority of the single-family buildings that are in the immediate area. It also had suffered some fire damage and was subsequently condemned in its recent history. Approval of the appeal would allow for rehabilitation of the building and allow it to return to productive use. We believe that that would meet some of the hardship criteria that the board will consider. For that reason, we have no objection.
Thank you. All right, Mr. Gamallo, why don't you tell us what we're looking at here?
There is a detached structure. It's 4 stories above grade. It's on a significantly large piece of land. It's 120 by 160, or nearly 19,000 square feet of property area. The building itself is approximately 2,000 square feet per floor, or 8,000 square feet or so, give or take. It was previously used as an apartment. It has been vacant for quite a number of years, and the current configuration, that the units are almost too large for sort of current market. So we wanted to introduce an additional unit per floor in order to give sort of a right size to these units. We have a mix of 2-bedroom and 1-bedroom apartments are proposed in this building that would be sort of at sort of market size and market rate in the area. We are not proposing any additions or any alterations to the exterior of the building. There's I think, I can't remember, it's 2 or 3 existing fire escapes on the building. So we have basically everything we need as far as access and exiting for the building as is, without having to alter anything on the outside of the building. We would obviously add windows and doors, because there's no exterior doors or windows on this property currently. That's basically it. So.
Mr. Tiso had referenced a prior fire at this location.
I'm not sure. It's possible. I mean, there is. I mean, it's pretty damaged on the inside. I mean, it's not a. It hasn't been habitable for quite a while. I couldn't say exactly when, but there is. I think there is some evidence on the lower level of
yes,
fire.
Yes, the first floor level.
Yeah.
That was on fire.
Yeah.
We are raised.
If you can state your name for the record, sir.
William Brodus. I'm general contractor on the job.
Okay, and can you spell your last name, sir?
Broaddus.
Thank you. You can use the microphone if you need to pull around and up there too. You were saying, sir?
There was fire damage on the first floor apartments. We removed it and stabilized the building right now while we're waiting for approval. The building was purchased through one house at a time.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, for what it may be worth, I have in the city's property records system back to October of 2001 was the condemnation notice due to fire.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Cesar. I see that there was a prior approval for 9 units back in 2016, and that was a second approval after an application in, looks like 2007. It was also an approval for 9 DUs. Do you know what happened with those prior development attempts?
Well, as far as I know, I don't think anything. I don't think they could afford to rebuild the building. They probably just walked away from it.
Any evidence of any prior work?
No work was done.
Yeah.
Nothing at all.
Mr. Tiso, have you been able to see if there were any permits or anything like that that were pulled?
I did not look in too much in depth, but I actually believe I remembered this case, participating in it in my prior role in the 2007 instance. And of course, that was during the bubble pop where, we just saw, a rush to try and develop before financing fell out. So that doesn't surprise me. There's some permit activity from the 2007 timeframe, interior clearing demo, some other inspections, but nothing of significance really anywhere in recent history.
Okay. Mr. Baumgartner, you got anything?
I'm just looking at the permit history right now, and it would match what Mr. Tiso.
I think we're looking at the same printout.
That's exactly right.
Okay. All right. Any questions?
Yeah, our data sheet shows no parking, but we're seeing a fairly large lot. I mean, can you tell us why part of that lot couldn't be used for all-street parking for both automobile and bicycle, which is required now?
I think we could provide some off-street parking. There is an existing curb cut that we could sort of activate, and there is a flat portion of earth adjacent to the building that we could provide some off-street parking. So that wouldn't be an issue.
Okay.
All right.
And that'll be for the bikes are required, so I'll ask the question for the bikes as well. You know,
Yes.
not a big space for a bike.
Wouldn't be a problem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think for vehicles, we've got 4 spaces would be required.
I think that would be fine.
So 5 total
Yes.
for the bicycle.
Well, there's separate requirements for the bike.
Bicycles, yes. But, all right. Any other questions? Anything further?
No, sir.
Okay, thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
Take care, John. Right, 2018-191, 111 Riverside Road, John Theosarin.
Yes, sir.
Sir. Right, sir, you're Mr. Theosarin?
Yes, sir.
All right. And, sir, we have this as an application to use the premises as a wood shop and direct-to-consumer retail sales of cabinetry and furniture. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
All right. Gentlemen, if you would please raise your right hands and be sworn.
Swear or affirm under the penalty of perjury that the answers that you give and the statements that you make will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
All right, we have staff reports. Tiso?
I believe the property had previously been used for fabrication of steel products, and if that is the case, then we would view that the change of fabrication in steel products going to wood products of cabinets and furniture would be an akin use. That would not be a change in non-conforming use, and if that is the case, we have no objection.
All right, thank you. All right, Mr. Theosarin, why don't you tell us about what's being proposed here? In addition, if you could address the history of use at the location.
Sure. We purchased this building in December. It was constructed circa 1980. It's been used for industrial use that entire time. The prior owner operated a business called Hughes Industrial Services that did steel fabrication and machinery repair, specifically forklifts. It was constructed as an industrial building. It's a rectangular block, 2-story building with a steel truss roof that encloses about 6,500 square feet of open space. The properties surrounding the building are all currently being used for commercial purposes. To the left is a property that's been storing automobiles and construction equipment. The other side houses a property that has a trucking company that wraps around behind our property. And one property over from that is a similar building to ours that it's a little larger, but it currently houses a company that manufactures steel wire. In addition, the property directly across from us, that would be the fourth side, is currently zoned industrial. I believe it's I-2. What we're proposing is to relocate a woodworking business that had been operating in Anne Arundel County and has outgrown its space. So this is a growing business that we would like to move into this location. The business primarily constructs furniture, wood cabinetry, kitchen cabinetry, things of that nature. They also do more craft woodworking. They turn bowls. They make specialty furniture items as well. I have some examples of work.
Are you grab that out. You said you bought the property in December?
Yes, sir.
All right, and the prior owner had a metalworking operation there repairing, I think you said forklifts and other
Yes.
equipment? All right, and when you purchased the property, were they still in operation?
He was retiring and closing down his business, so we've spent the last few months with him moving all of his equipment out, helping him clear the property out.
Okay, so.
So they had been in business, he just started shutting his business down last year, he's essentially
Okay, so
retiring.
at least as of at some point last year, he was operating
Yes.
the business, then he decides to retire, sells the property to you.
Put the building up for sale, we bought it because it was the right size, suitable for our business.
Okay. All right, you were saying about the photos?
That's just a handout that just gives some examples of some of the work that the working shop has done, just to give you a sense of sort of the things we do. So a lot of it's consumer-driven. We do a lot of built-in furniture. You'll see some examples of built-in cabinetry done in residences. We've done work with Baltimore businesses. If you've ever eaten at Jimmy's famous seafood recently, all the dining tables in there were constructed by us. We've done historic reproductions for moldings and doors for contractors that are rehabbing Baltimore buildings. I think one of the examples we pulled is some doors that were constructed for the Residence Inn on Light Street when they did a renovation. So that handout is really just to give a flavor of the type of work we're currently doing.
I see there's another small area in the front for parking.
Yes, there's a current poured concrete pad that will accommodate approximately 5 vehicles.
Okay. Okay, any questions?
None.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Just that one. Okay. 2018-180, 1900 through 1920 East Lombard Street, Gregory Rapisarda.
Afternoon, Mr. Chair.
Afternoon, Mr. Rapisarda. Good seeing you again. We have this as an application to use the premises as a brewery with accessory tavern and tap room. Is that correct?
That is correct.
All right. And Mr. Rapisarda, there was a woman here earlier who had signed in on this case. I don't see her
She's
still
not.
here.
That's correct.
You went out and you had a discussion with her?
We did.
All right. I believe she had said that she wasn't opposed. She had some questions about parking, things like
That
that.
is correct. And we answered those questions. Mr. Ernst Valerie is one of the owners and developers, and we were able to answer all of her questions. And she said, well, if I don't have to stick around to tell them, then please pass along that she's supportive, as you could see from the homeowners association and the neighborhood association letters as well. But
Okay. All right. Mr. Valerie, would you please raise your right hand to be sworn, please?
Swear or affirm under the penalty of perjury that the answers that you give, the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Thank you.
All right. Do we have staff reports?
Yes, we have a letter dated June 28th from the Washington Hill Community Association. A letter dated June 26th from the Upper Fells Point Improvement Association. And a letter dated August 23rd from the Butchers Hill Community Land Use Committee. All are in support of the request. They have no conditions that would mitigate any nuisances that they're of interest in.
You, Mr. Chiso?
This property is located within Washington Hill District, which is a locally designated historic district. We would recommend approval of the application subject to the condition that any changes to the building, including additions, demolitions, or alterations, are completed in accordance with an authorization to proceed issued from the Commission for Historic and Architectural Preservation. We also understood from the community that they have entered into a memorandum of understanding with the Washington Hill community.
All right, thank you. Mr. Apostard, is the condition offer of the planning department acceptable to your client?
It is.
All right, and you've got I guess, agreement in place with the community association?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Valerie? Okay.
Yes, sir.
All right.
Thanks, Valerie.
All right, gentlemen, if you could tell us about what's being proposed here, and you can also address the, I guess, whatever agreement you've reached with the community association, and if you can also discuss the interrelation of the tavern use and the brewery use as well.
That sounds great. So I'll give an overview of that, and I'll let Mr. Valerie talk about whatever he needs to, but also to address that MOU that was referenced. We're talking about it's a large development. It's a little over an acre. It's various church buildings that were built in the 1800s. One portion of that, so if you look at we included a couple things. I think there's a question about you said the difference between the tavern and the brewery. So the brewery, because it's food processing, that's what requires the conditional use. That's what requires the application. Didn't feel right to just ask for a brewery approval in a vacuum. This is part of a larger redevelopment, and so that's why we included information, especially in the as-built. So the as-built are the 2 pages from Cho, Ben, Holback and Associates, and that shows the church buildings and complex as it is now. Shows the 2 levels. There's the 2 levels of parking, how it basically it's all encompassing between Wolf, Chapel, Baltimore, and Lombard. The Exhibit B, which is this revised floor plan that says Ministry of Brewing, that actually that starts to now zoom in on just the brewery portion of it. It does show all of the other seating and some things that will happen, but basically the conditional use for the brewery is highlighted there, and that's about 2,500 square feet. And the primary purpose of that is to brew beer. And so under the food processing light, that's why we're seeking the conditional use. There will be other aspects to it. That'll be at the tavern. That will operate actually, so a tavern is a permitted use, and they'll work that out at some point with planning and with permitting, as well as with CHAP, evidently, and to the extent that it might touch on the exterior. But the focus of this and the main goal here with Ministry of Brewing is a brewery, as a local brewery that's in the neighborhood.
And about how much beer are you projecting to be able to produce?
So the numbers that we put in the application have to do more with the possible manufacture with the equipment that they'll have. They anticipate about 500 barrels in the first year, and then it would slowly build up. Same way that we put in there about 8 employees. There certainly isn't going to be 8 employees at once, but think about what the maximum could what you could produce in that space with that equipment and what you'd use. And so that's why we based the parking under 8 employees in a shift. There won't be right now, but it's possible. That would require 2 off-street parking. Because of the amount of parking that's already available in there, they've reserved 3 spaces for employees, and that's why we set it up that way.
Okay. And where will the beer be sold?
Will be sold from the brewery.
Okay. I know some of the brew houses in the city, they sell at their location, and then they also sell at other various different stores and whatnot throughout the city. You're primarily just going to be only selling, or I guess you're going to be exclusively selling there at the brewery?
Actually, I better let Mr. Valerie handle that, because from a
Yep.
So under the Class 5 license, you can sell up to 2,000 barrels on site, but we anticipate selling about 500. And then beyond that, you would have to go through a distributor. So we primarily want to sell on site and to have it as a local brewery for folks to come and experience the space and the beer.
Okay. Any questions? Any further, gentlemen?
Nope, just as a summary that we think it meets those requirements, and we ask you that you approve this as a brewery.
Great, thank you.
Thank you very
Take
much.
care. Good luck to you. To appeal 2018-189, 409 Charter Oak Avenue, David Caravan. Okay, all right, folks. Mr. Caravan, we have this as an application to construct a second-floor rear addition at this location. Is that correct?
That's correct.
All right. Folks, if you would please, raise your right hands and be sworn.
Do you swear or affirm under the penalty of perjury that the answers that you give and statements that you make will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay. Do we have staff reports? Mr. Catiso? Okay. All right, Mr. Caravan, why don't you tell us about what's being proposed here?
It's a renovation of the interior spaces on both levels, and a second-floor rear addition that will accommodate a master bedroom to have a walk-in closet and a bathroom. The second floor, other two existing bedrooms will be renovated using the same partition layout, and the bathroom on the second floor that supports those two bedrooms will be renovated as well. Basement will be left as it is.
Okay. Looks like the addition is going over a pre-existing portion of the structure.
The first floor footprint, it will stay within that envelope.
Okay. Okay, since I think I get your part of it, ma'am, if you would please state your name for the record.
I'm Sandra Thacker.
Okay, Ms. Thacker, you can bend that microphone down if you need to. There you go. All right, Ms. Thacker, you signed in opposition to this case. What's your position on it?
Well, we've discussed what was happening with it because I wasn't notified previously of the plans, and we've come to some agreement
Okay.
on what is going to happen.
Okay, why don't you tell us about that?
Well, I was concerned about water problems that I have at my house and have previously had from.
And where is your home, ma'am?
My house is adjoining to this house.
Okay, so are you at?
I'm at 411.
411, that's what it was.
Yes, and we share a
Common wall.
common wall.
All right. So what agreements have you reached?
That they're going to switch the bathroom on the top that goes over the back porch, they're going to switch the bathroom and the walk-in closet. So the bathroom will be on the other side, on the outside.
Okay.
So if there would be any leakage or anything from that bathroom, it wouldn't come into my house. And also on the first floor where I have a walk-in pantry for my kitchen, their house used to be a walk-in pantry many years ago, and it's been changed over the years, and they had plumbing put in. I know there was a washer and dryer in there, and now they say it's a bathroom. And they're going to switch the plumbing in that room also. So it's going to be on
Switch it to the other side.
the other side,
Okay.
correct.
Anything else?
My only concern, and we discussed this, I just want some clarification on it. This house was placed on the National Register of Historic Places in 2003. And I just want to know, do they need to have any other permission from any other group to do this?
Mr. Tissot?
I would have to check to see whether it is a locally designated district. I don't know if the neighbors would happen to know that.
It's in Winston Radnor.
Okay, is that a locally designated district or is it a national register?
On their website, they say it's the National Register of Historic Places.
Okay, so the National Register districts enable tax credits potentially, but local historic districts have design requirements and specific reviews required. So no further reviews would be required unless they're applying for tax credits.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. And Mr. Caravan, has Ms. Thacker stated the agreement as you understand it?
Yes.
Okay. And you both are acceptable, I guess you both find the terms acceptable to you?
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
Okay, what we could do, folks, is we can incorporate your agreement into the record. This case was on our consent docket originally. We can, now that you're in agreement, we can have this approved by consent, subject to the agreement that you've reached. If you want, you can just shoot us an email with the terms as you've stated them here today, and then that way we can have the agreement expressed in your own terms, and we'll incorporate that into the approval in this case. Is that fine?
A quick clarification.
Sure.
So you're requesting that we send you an email based on what the agreement is?
Yes,
Okay.
yeah. Just saying, we can either write it up ourselves, as we've just did it, or you can submit it via an email. And it
Okay.
should copy Ms. Thacker on it, or if Ms. Thacker, if you want to send
That's
it.
what,
Yeah.
if that's a good suggestion, I'll send it to her first, and
Yep.
she'll, for approval, she'll send it to me, and then you'll see the trail.
That's right.
Okay.
Great.
Okay?
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, thank you both so much. I guess all of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Take care.
Email address.
Okay. I'm going to call 2018-170, 6006 Park Heights Avenue, Elisa Hertzmark.
Hello.
Hello, afternoon. Okay, Ms. Hertzmark. We have this as an application to increase the existing 30-child daycare center to 60-child daycare center with 20 staff. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. And you want to identify the folks you have with you today?
Yes, this is Bob Rosenfeld, Crunchy Englander. She's a neighbor and a resident of the Glen Neighborhood Association.
Can you restate that name, please?
Crunchy Englander.
Okay.
You can spell it.
CRONSHI, last name ENGLANDER.
Thank you.
And this is Rabbi Weiss. He is representative of the organization that runs the daycare, Congregation Kahal Hasidim.
Okay. All right, folks, I guess all those intending to give testimony, would you please raise your right hands to be sworn?
You swear or affirm under the penalty of perjury that the answers that you give and the statements that you make will be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth.
I affirm.
All right. Do we have staff reports?
Yes. First, we have a letter from the Glen Neighborhood Improvement Association. It's dated June 15th. They indicated that they have not received full answers to their questions, and considering these concerns and the short timeline given, that they have not reached a decision concerning issues of traffic and parking congestion, and therefore the association voted to oppose the expansion of the daycare center at this time. The Cross Country Improvement Association, they write that they have no objection to the zoning board granting approval of this use, that it was presented to the membership, and that is my end of staff reports. Does planning have anything?
We do. This is an expansion for an existing daycare operation. They do have a parking lot on the property which can meet the requirements for drop-off and pickup, as well as for staff parking. For that reason, we have no objection.
All right, thank you, Mr. Tiso. All right, Ms. Hertzmark, why don't you tell us about what's being proposed here?
Sure. So this is, as Mr. Tiso said, an existing daycare center that was previously approved for 30 children as a conditional use daycare. There is a rear parking lot that does meet the requirements of the zoning code for the parking requirement, and there is an existing drop-off area back there. It should be noted that most of the children who attend this daycare are walked there by their parents. There are very few families who drive their children there. I do want to address some of the concerns brought up in the opposition letter from the Glen Neighborhood Association. Prior to that, I want to invite Ms. Englander to testify. She attended the Glen Neighborhood Association meeting and is also a close neighbor, just to give some context to the letter that the board received.
Sure. Ms. Englander.
Hi, how are you?
Good, thank you. You can bend that. Thank you, Mr.
Okay.
Rosenfeld.
My name, as you heard, is Crunchy Englander. I've been a resident of the area for 35 years, around the corner from this daycare center. When I went to that meeting that night, I was very, very disturbed by the tenor of the meeting. First of all, it was very gracious of Rabbi Weiss to attend at the last minute. I know he had been called very, very close to the time of the meeting. And even with that, they gave him the discourtesy of waiting till the end of the meeting to allow him to be heard. At that time, he wasn't really heard because there were 2 or 3 individuals within the meeting who were deliberately obstructionist, and they really did not give him a chance to answer the questions that we all had, namely the parking issues and the safety issues for the children. When I spoke to Rabbi Weiss afterwards, and he attempted to voice these, to voice what the solutions would be to these problems, however, he was really not allowed to speak. I was very deeply upset when I saw the letter, voted upon, I might add, by members of the board who had not even bothered to attend that meeting. And I decided that it was worth taking off the time from work today to come here to let you all know that this was not the will of the neighborhood. In fact, the membership at that meeting was not even offered the opportunity to vote as to whether they felt that this should go forward or not. This was solely a decision by members of the board, some of whom, as I mentioned, were not even there that night, and some of whom would have objected to this whether they had proposed to deliver children by helicopter. So if you have any questions for me, as I said, I'm a longtime resident, former vice president of Glen, by the way, former board member as well.
Thank you, ma'am.
Bob Rosenfeld is going to submit a memo of some of our responses to the issues brought up in the letter of opposition, and I will go through them for the benefit of everyone here. The letter of opposition mentions parking As I stated before, the daycare does meet the requirements of the zoning code for the parking required based on employees per peak shift. So we feel that while people may have questions about parking, that is not a zoning issue relevant to what we're discussing at this meeting. There are.
Say for the record that we've got, as the identified issue in the case, solely conditional use as a daycare center. This would be an ASA modification of the existing conditional use, as there was approval back in 2015 for a 30-child daycare center. You're obviously proposing to go to 60.
Correct. Thank you. There were questions regarding drop-off and traffic in the area. So as part of this, I also want to actually submit this exhibit. I apologize, I don't have as many copies.
That's all right.
But this is just a neighborhood context map that shows where many of these properties are, and the daycare in question is at 6006 Park Heights Avenue. It should be noted that the majority of the families, I believe right now all except for one, live in properties that are on this map. They either live in what's called the duplexes there, they live in the Sheffield apartment building, or they live in the Pinckney Court apartments. Those are all within about a 1-block radius of the daycare center. And this is why most of the families are able, in fact, to walk to the daycare center. They are affiliated with this. There are also other properties. There's a community center. There's a proposed synagogue. They're all affiliated with the same program and community there. With the increase from 30 children to 60 children, we anticipate, as I said, right now, one family drives the child or children to the daycare. We anticipate with the addition of 60, maybe one more family will drive, keeping the same ratio. Again, the increase from 30 to 60 children are still going to be children who live in those properties affiliated with this COLA community. At the June 13th Glen meeting, there was discussion of additional parking drop-off area under the Sheffield House apartment building. There's sort of an at-grade entrance that goes down under the building that has a parking area that is underutilized right now. And Rabbi Weiss did offer at the meeting that could be looked into as a potential drop-off circulation parking to address concerns that the community had. You will also see on that context map, the rabbi of this community, his property is adjacent right behind the daycare. And the congregation is also willing to look at using part of his backyard for potential improvements, a circular driveway type of thing to address circulation concerns. Again, as Ms. Englander noted, that there wasn't really proper space to discuss all of this given at the Glen meeting. But those are two solutions that the community is willing to look into to alleviate some community concerns. It should also be noted that there was a daycare called Gan Yafa located at 6106 Biltmore Avenue that is licensed for 60 children that officially closed its doors this past Friday on, that would be June 22nd. Sorry, I have that incorrect in my memo. I said 23rd. 50 children?
Yeah, 50.
Yeah. That daycare was likely contributing to some of the traffic, parking, circulation concerns in that area. That daycare being closed, no longer having those 50 children, we're asking for an increase of 30 in our daycare. We see that as a net decrease in any trips generated in that area. The third concern that the Glen opposition letter brought up was a short timeline of their ability to discuss this. There's a long timeline given on this. I won't go through everything, but just to note that 6 weeks ago was when Rabbi Weiss contacted the Glen board to begin discussions about this. He followed up numerous times. He did have a meeting with Ms. Dubin, who was on, I believe, the Housing and Zoning Committee of the Glen Board. He was scheduled to have a meeting with the Housing and Zoning Committee on June 7th, which would have been the place for a small group conversation to work out some issues. That meeting was canceled by Glen, and he was instead invited to present at the general meeting a full week later on June 13th. So we see that as sort of two lost opportunities there. One, losing a week of time to work out any concerns, and two, losing a small group discussion in favor of more of a general presentation. While it is unfortunate that there wasn't enough time to work out issues with Glenn, we feel like the missed opportunities were not because of our client, but they were because of the neighborhood association. And given that the original contact was 6 weeks ago, we feel that it did our effort to reach out to them, and we would hope that the board can understand this dynamic when considering that letter of opposition.
Any questions?
I have a question. Again, Yafa Daycare,
Yep.
you indicated it just recently closed.
Yes.
Do you have any understanding as to why?
May I?
Yeah.
Actually, I'm a neighbor to Yafa.
Yes.
And she is
Can you use the
starting.
microphone, please?
She is starting another business. She has, after 20-some-odd years, if not more, she's had enough. And she's a grandma herself, and she'd like some more time for her own family. The Ganyafa, by the way, was almost exclusively car drop-off and pickup on Biltmore Avenue. So Ms. Hertzmark is correct that a lot of the traffic that had been generated, which was going down Pinckney, which is the area that they're proposing, is going to be mitigated now.
Okay, so she is seeking to establish another business at that
She
location?
has already established another business which is earning her far more with far less work.
At that location?
Not at the location. She's, it's a business that she provides setups for weddings, centerpieces, decor, rental of that type of thing.
Just so I'm clear,
Mhm.
is there any possibility that somebody else could come in and operate a daycare at that location?
I believe she is the only she lives there. It's her residence, so I don't think that we could get another person unless they buy the residence. And
Understood. That's all I had, thanks.
Thanks. Any other questions? Okay. Anything further?
Well, I just want to thank Mrs. Englander for sticking up for me, Look, I came back, just want to say, I came back a day early from a trip to Israel for the June 7th meeting that was proposed before I left.
Robert, can you use the microphone?
I changed my ticket to come back to meet with that small group after I met Mrs. Dubin in my home. And we said June 7th will give us enough time to work things out, and that didn't happen, so it was kind of frustrating. The proposal for 60, that's a maximum. We're not planning to reach that, at this moment, but we are here in front of this board asking for that amount of children. It's going to be a gradual increase. We have a lot of other projects going on in that community, so we plan on bettering our relationship with the neighborhood association and letting this just little bump in the road, but we're not looking to create a rift in the neighborhood. We, in fact, I'm working now on scheduling a meeting with some of the other schools and organizations in that corridor to see what we can do collectively as a body to alleviate some of the concerns of traffic. I will say that our organization has made a tremendous amount of investment into the Park Heights corridor. We built 20 brand new homes. We brought in taxpayers who contribute to the community, who volunteer in the community, and overall we're embedding. That's a good word. I don't know. In Brooklyn, that's what we say. We're embedding the community. It was just interesting. The speaker, before they talked about our project, the district attorney or the general, Mosby, what is she?
Yeah, so sort of.
Yeah, she came and she talked about the crime in the neighborhood and all the concerns that we have. And then I get up and I'm talking about the growth and the development and, I got a harder time than she got. Whatever. But I'm not running today, so it's all good. I just hope you'll look favorably upon our project.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Ms. Hertzmark or Mr. Rosenfeld, anything further?
Not at this time.
All right. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Let me stay put. We got another one. Mr. Mr. Rosenfeld, Ms. Hertzmark, yeah, you guys want to stay up here?
Hoping we would do that.
Okay, calling 2018-193, 6107 through 6109 Park Heights Avenue. This is also Ms. Hertzmark.
Thank you.
All right, Ms. Hertzmark, we have this as an application to consolidate 20 condominium lots and change occupancy from 17 dwelling with storage units to 10 dwelling with storage units and a 65-child, 10-staff daycare center with 15 off-street parking spaces at this location. Is that correct?
That is correct. Actually, I believe it's 14 parking spaces.
14? Okay.
Yes, it's 14 parking spaces because then there are an additional 2 that are used for drop-off.
Gotcha. All right. All right, everybody's already been sworn, so we'll turn to staff reports.
Okay, we have basically the same letter from the Cross Country Improvement Association indicating that they understand that the property is condominiums, that the condominium regime will be dissolved, the building will be reduced to use 7 of the units for daycare center, and they have no objection to the zoning board granting the approval of this use.
For planning, we understand that the proposal includes a widening for the existing curb cut to facilitate drop-offs and pickups, and we recommend approval, subject to the condition that the access to and from the drop-off pickup area is improved in accordance with plans approved by DOT.
Okay. And Mr. Baumgartner or Mr. Henry, as I understand it, we received some communication from either a resident or from the community, from the condo association, some confusion with the condo regime?
That's correct. We received 2 phone calls from residents just requesting clarification that all property owners within the condominium, either individual owners or the council unit owners, some clarification regarding that all parties that had any kind of ownership interest had approved of moving forward with the appeal, and we did receive, I believe, 4 affidavits from, I believe, all of the parties at issue that had agreed to moving forward with the appeal.
All right, thank you. All right, Ms. Hertzmark.
Yep, so as Mr. Tiso mentioned, we are proposing to consolidate the units in the building, dissolve the condominium association, and convert the building to 10 dwelling units to remain, and the remainder of the building will be a daycare for 65 children with 10 staff. We do accept the condition of constructing the rear parking and circulation improvements per what will be approved by DOT, and that is on our BMZA plan. There are, as we said, there are 14 parking spots and then 2 additional spaces that will be signed as designated for drop-off and pickup only, 10-minute parking, so parents can park, walk their child in, come back, and move on. And due to staggered pickups and drop-offs, we feel operationally that will work fine for drop-off and pickup. And additionally, there is 2-way traffic, so parents can enter from Pinckney Road, they can exit out Taney. We don't feel like there will be any issues with circulation. As Mr. Baumgartner mentioned, we did get affidavits from all 4 of the people who represent all of the unit owners and associations of owners, and I do have additional copies of those. Are there any? That's the plan. Are there any questions specific to it?
No, I think our biggest one was just getting some clarification regarding communication with the unit owners, which you've been able to confirm for us.
Right, and actually, sorry, to note to that, part of the confusion from the unit owners was the timeline. They wanted to be sure that no one was going to be demolishing walls or anything while they still owned it, and we were able to clarify that with the owners, that we were doing the process in order of getting the zoning approvals, the consolidation, the consolidation, and that no construction would begin until all of that was in place. And once they understood that, they were able to sign.
Okay, and what's your rough timeline?
When's the,
Purchase?
for the purchase? Yeah.
It should be the beginning of July.
Okay, and then the work you'll need to do to convert the space and.
Yeah,
and-
we're not looking at that much construction work. The condominiums are set up with big enough rooms that we'll be able to utilize them as is.
Okay.
Pretty much.
All right, so what's sort of your estimated?
Oh,
time of
we got to be
completion?
in there by September.
Okay, moving pretty fast. All right, any other questions?
No.
All right, thank you all. Okay. Last calling 2018-159, 3501 Dillon Street, Stephen Klein.
Good afternoon, Caroline Hecker, Rosenberg Martin, on behalf of the applicants, Mr. and Mrs. Klein, who are here with us today. We also have my colleague Justin Williams, who's going to hand out some exhibits for the board, as well as Nate Predel, who is our planning consultant, and Matt Garano, who is a realtor, who's going to help us with this a little bit.
Okay, good afternoon again, Ms. Hecker and Mr. Williams. All right, if all those intending to give testimony in this case will please raise their right hands to be sworn.
Do you swear or affirm under the penalty of perjury that the answers that you give and the statements that you make will be true, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Yes.
All right, do we have staff reports?
Yes, a letter dated June 22nd from the Canton Community Association. They write, a review of these plans indicates that the existing rear parking pad accessing onto Bayless Street will be replaced by our garage. Otherwise, the plans are quite straightforward and do not raise any concerns with our committee or the immediate neighbors. Consequently, please be advised that the association supports the variance application for this proposed project. Does planning have
No, we don't.
Nothing for planning?
No, sir.
Okay, all right. Ms. Hecker.
Thank you. This is an application for a rear yard and lot coverage variance necessary to construct a three-story addition in the rear of the house at 3501 Dillon Street. This was originally scheduled for a hearing at the end of May. About an hour before the hearing, we learned of an objection from the neighbor, so we postponed so we could try to work something out with them. Those discussions have not proven to be fruitful. I'll get into that in a little bit later on, but here we are today. The existing building was built in 2006. The Kleins have owned it since 2013, and you'll see some photos in the file. The existing building, unlike many other properties that are corner lots in the Canton neighborhood, doesn't occupy the entire lot. There's a parking pad in the rear. It also doesn't have a basement, unlike most of these larger corner properties in the Canton neighborhood. Mr. Predel, who is a planning consultant, who I know the board is familiar with, come on up here, Nate. We'll tell you a little bit about what's proposed. You'll see copies of the plans in the file as well.
Good afternoon again. Nate Predel from the planning and land use firm AB Associates. And here to talk a little bit about the plans you have in front of you. As you'll notice, there's an existing three-story structure. We're on a corner lot here of Bayless Street and Dillon Street with the house facing Dillon. The majority of the length of the house running down Bayless Street with about approximately 16 feet open rear yard that's currently used as a parking pad. And the proposal, and there's also, may not be shown on those plans, a 8 to 10 foot covered screened-in porch that also projects into the rear yard. And the proposal is to demolish the existing one-story screened-in porch, construct a carport, and then a two-story rear addition, so a three-story rear addition on top of that. The third floor will be set back 6 feet from the property line, whereas the first and second floor, the carport, and the second floor living space will be built to the property line. When the Kleins, Mr. and Mrs. Klein came to me with this project, they expressed their desire was to stay in the city and have a family, and they were hoping to improve their property in some way. And it was my opinion at the time, and it remains so today, that the corner lots, particularly this corner lot, have been historically treated differently, both from a use, from a construction, and from an approval standpoint. And so I thought that, in keeping in line with some of the recent and historic approvals, this would be a candidate to an expansion. And the only real means there, other than going up, would be towards the rear lot line. Just some examples. You have some in your file that Ms. Hecker submitted, but I also have an additional, you can pass this around. This is a small area plan showing the corner lot, full lot coverage structures within the immediate area. I'll point to, as an example, the corner intersection of Dillon and Bayless Street, they're the only one that does not have full lot coverage. You go to the next immediate intersection of O'Donnell and Bayless Street, all 4 structures there cover the lot, and in most cases, up to 2nd or 3rd floors. The zoning code in itself, particularly Transform Baltimore, treats corner lots differently. One example being the neighborhood commercial establishment. That doesn't speak to this particular issue, but what it does is an acknowledgement that corner lots in general, particularly in residential neighborhoods, have been treated differently. That's one. The other example being that there is a increase in allowable bulk regulations in R8 for certain uses on corner lots. The example being multifamily dwellings are allowed by conditional use to go higher on a corner lot than they are on an interior lot. And so these are just a couple things that point to examples of how corner lots have been always treated differently and continue to do so. And I think this addition would really just bring their property in line with the majority of corner lots, particularly in the immediate area, as well as the greater neighborhood of Canton and the rest of Baltimore. For similar row house neighborhoods, that is.
Thank you. So in preparation for this hearing, we approached the neighbors in the surrounding properties around this house, and you'll see in the file that there are emails of support from the neighbors in the 4 homes along Bayless Street, 1001, 1003, 1005, 1007 Bayless Street. There's also a letter of support, as Mr. Henry indicated, from the Canton Community Association. But our immediate neighbors on the Dillon Street side are here today in opposition, and we'll hear from them obviously in a moment. But as we understand their concerns, they relate to the fact that they believe that the proposed addition would obstruct light from their backyard, and that they'll lose sunlight in their backyard area. And they believe that this reduction in sunlight in their rear yard is going to cause a reduction in value of their property by $25,000. And they've suggested that if the clients were willing to pay them $25,000, they would be willing to support the application. And there's some email correspondence to that effect in the file that you have in front of you. We've brought with us today Matt Garano, who's a realtor, who I'd like to come up here for a moment, who can talk a little bit about property values and what things impact values of property, particularly in lots like this.
Good afternoon. Matt Garano, Associate Broker, RE/MAX American Dream. I've been licensed since 2007. Lived in Fells Point neighborhood since 2008 and owned multiple buildings in the area. Represented the clients on this purchase in 2013. Sold over 40 homes in the neighborhood, as well as over 80 in the city. So very familiar with these types of properties. It's my experience that no 2 houses are the same, and to try to assign a single unit of value to one particular feature of the house is inaccurate, because there are many features that affect value. In my personal experience, professional experience, and backed up by a Zillow study, it shows that price, location, layout, construction materials, and size are the most important factors. In this particular Zillow study, they ranked outdoor space 11th out of 22 on an importance list, and having natural light or a view ranked 17th and 19th out of 22 respectively. And they ranked budget, neighborhood safety, and floor plan layout as the top. So I believe if you have a shady backyard versus a sunny backyard, it's personal preference. And if you happen to have a roof deck and a shady backyard, then you have the best of both worlds. That's all I have.
Thank you.
There's a letter from Mr. Grano to the effect of his testimony in the file as well. With regard to the legal standards that the board is required to consider in order to approve a variance, the board must find that the property is unique and that the unique factors of the property create a practical difficulty or unreasonable hardship for the applicant. Here, the unique factors relate to the fact that the existing structure, which the clients didn't construct, does not occupy the entire lot currently, unlike many, many other structures on corner lots in Canton. It also doesn't have a basement, which really limits their ability for storage. And, you know, these unique factors really create the need for them to expand their house so that they can hopefully have a family and stay in the neighborhood. They are not intending to expand the house to increase the income potential or value of the property. It's really to make it livable. And they hope to be able to stay in the neighborhood, to grow their family, and they want to remain in Canton. The
Neighbors here live where?
the house immediately next door.
So they're
On Dillon Street.
3503.
Yes. And you can see, some of the photos in there show that property as well. You can see that there's, that property has a roof deck, as Mr. Garano mentioned, and yeah, is located immediately east of this lot.
Okay, and according to the tax map here, I guess the properties are oriented north to south, facing north.
That's correct, yes. Yes, this property has a Dillon Street address, but I believe the front door is on Bayless Street, if that's correct. So yeah, it sort of fronts on both sides. The approval of the variance would not be in any way injurious to the use and enjoyment of other properties in the immediate vicinity or diminish or impair property values, as you've heard from Mr. Garano. And also, as indicated by the letters of support, it's consistent with other corner lots in the Canton neighborhood, as Mr. Prettle indicated. And, you know, it is consistent with the purposes and intent of the zoning code to permit families to grow in Baltimore City and to retain residents. It's not located in an urban renewal area or in a CHAP district, and it is consistent with the city's master plan, again, by retaining residents through a variety of housing options. The proposed variances will not be in any way detrimental to or endanger public health, safety, welfare, as indicated by the letter from the Canton Community Association and the other neighboring letters of support. It's not contrary to the public interest, and the variances are the minimum necessary to afford relief. We're happy to answer any questions the board may have. Otherwise, we're happy to hear from the neighbors and respond with whatever they have.
Okay. Any questions at this point?
No.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Board?
Good afternoon. My name is Joseph Traplin. I'm the owner and current resident of 3503 Dillon Street, and this is Shannon Smith, and she lives there with me.
State your name again?
Joseph Traplin. We, Joseph Traplin and Shannon Smith, argue that a lot coverage variance shall not be granted because no unnecessary hardship or practical difficulty would result from enforcing the strict letter of the lot coverage zoning regulation in Table 9-401. The current structure at 3501 Dillon Street is a 2,310 square foot, 3-story row house with a rooftop deck and a parking pad. Therefore, the proposed addition only adds a garage, additional square footage for living or storage, and a new rooftop deck, none of which are a necessity. Further, the proposed addition would incur significant damage to my property's value. The 3-story, 100% lot coverage addition would enclose my backyard area, blocking natural light and obstructing my view of the Patapsco River. Additionally, the proposed addition would pose new fire risks, as it would be only 4 feet from the row houses on the east side of the 1000 block of South Bayless Street. Finally, the addition would increase the risk of flooding to my backyard area, as the 3500 block of Dillon Street lies on a hill sloping downward east to west. Also, Nate Prettle mentioned that there are some exemptions for multi-dwelling homes in the area, and this is just a single-family dwelling home, I believe. Also, it was mentioned that we believe that the depreciation of our home would be around $25,000, and that's not accurate. The $25,000 was just an initial starting point. As you guys all know, with negotiating, you don't necessarily ask what the final things, but also you can note from the emails that we rescinded the offer because after we discussed it over, we realized that the damages were very hard to kind of estimate, and we just thought it was in our best interest long term to just oppose the addition rather than trying to figure out a fair compensation. And then Shannon's gonna add some points. Also, here's some photos from my backyard that show where the,
And if you could walk us through what we're looking at.
Okay, yeah, absolutely. Okay, so the first photos from my deck on the second floor, and that kind of shows where the addition's gonna go and how it's gonna kind of block the natural light on
where
the
that
west
car
side.
is where they want to put the garage in and
Yes,
move
yeah.
upward.
Okay,
Yeah, so they're gonna
this is
go,
looking out the rear of your house. This space here
is where the addition's gonna go, correct.
Gotcha.
And then there's just some other photos, all kind of just different angles of the same view.
Okay, so this is showing roughly the same view, a
Yeah.
little bit more of the back.
Yeah. Yes, sir. And here
So
are,
it's looking sort of down into that space.
yes.
This one here, this is the, I guess, second from last in the packet. Is this taken from, it looks like,
The rooftop deck, and you can see the water and Fort McHenry in the distance.
okay. And then this is just the
Street view from Bayless, yes, sir.
Gotcha.
And here's a copy of the letter I just read you.
Sure.
The same thing.
These are all the same?
Yes. Do you need all?
Nope.
Okay.
Hello, Mr. Chairman. My name is Shannon Smith. I am a resident of 3501 as well as a licensed realtor in the area. Unfortunately, we were just presented with all this information. The information that I'm going to present to you was given to them about three and a half weeks ago. So they've had time to look it over. Our initial evaluation of, and really email, was given an hour before the initial trial because we did not meet until less than 24 hours before the initial trial. And that wasn't to anybody's fault. Our schedules didn't work out. We had to reschedule the first meeting because Elizabeth had to work late. Long story, but we met the evening beforehand. We had a few hours to discuss in the morning before I had to go to work, and our initial email offered a $25,000 towards reduction not only in home value but also in lifestyle changes, as well as or an option for $25,000 towards repair
Well, I'll
costs.
say that as far as, the sort of discussions that the parties have had about, potential resolution, that part of it, we're not really that interested in.
Absolutely.
The parties want to talk about settlement, they're free to talk about settlement. As I understand it, they're here asking for a variance, you're objecting to it. As Mr. Chaplin said, the basis for the objection to the requested variance is that, first, that its impact upon you believe would be deleterious to your own home value and is going to cut off your light, air, and views, et cetera, and that the hardship hasn't been established. That is, that really what's being sought is more for convenience of the homeowner as opposed to some sort of need that arises. That
Correct.
basically, right? Okay.
So what I wanted to present was the information that I gave them outlining the depreciation in our value of about $18,000. I only have one copy, so I apologize. I can run through it with you. And then, of course, as...
Provided it to them?
Yes, this was provided to them in a folder.
Okay.
So to make a long story short, and I'll let you guys run through this if you have any questions, what I did as a realtor in the area is I comped the home or provided its value if we were to sell now without the addition. And then if the addition were to be put up, of course, I can't judge future markets. I can only judge this one. The comparables that I used were 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom homes, very similar to ours in the same square footage. We're 930 square feet. And I find as a licensed realtor, that's the best way to do it. Stay in your area and comparable homes. So if we were to sell the home right now, unfortunately, he's only owned it about a year. So regardless, we would take a loss. You have to own the home about 3 to 5 years, depending on how much money you put down. So with that, we come up a loss after closing costs, all of that good stuff, of about $12,300 with an average days on market of 4.3. If we were to sell the home now in the same market with the proposed addition, and I have comps to support that printed out with pictures for you to review as well, we would be at about a $30,000 loss, so that's where I got that $18,000 number from, with an average days on market of 84.75. So not only will we get less money for the property, we'll sit on the market longer, which is going to incur more marketing costs and things like that. So in here, I have all of the homes that I referenced for this so that you can review, as well as their additions, the zoning laws, and things like that.
Okay.
There you go.
Anything further?
No, sir.
All right. Thank you, folks.
Just in conclusion, the hardship here in this case and the uniqueness factors are, this property is unlike any other properties on the corners in the Canton neighborhood. They're all larger properties. They really bookend the smaller homes that are in between. And for whatever reason, when this property was constructed...
Argument sort of like the uniqueness and the hardship are the same. That the
The unique-
uniqueness is that it's a small house and it's on a corner, which is unlike the typical situation where normally in this area, houses are larger. Houses, like its corner houses, are larger, but this one is smaller. But that uniqueness is also the hardship, because if they don't get the variance, then they'll be stuck with a smaller house.
Isn't that exactly what the variance standard is? That the uniqueness creates the hardship? You have a house that's unique because of its size, and that size is what's creating the hardship for the applicant. They'd love to be able to stay in the house and grow a family and, you know, really invest in the neighborhood. They've been here for several years. They really like the area. They'd love to stay, but they don't have enough space. The house doesn't have a basement for storage. They could use another bedroom if they're going to have children.
They dig a basement.
I think that's quite a proposition underneath a house.
It's a pertinent question, though, right?
Do you want
I can
to?
speak.
Yeah.
Hi, Stephen Klein. As the house is currently situated, it's just a crawl space under the house with out anything. There's no structure that goes down to the point where we could build a basement and go out. We currently only have one closet in the house. The other stuff, we're storing stuff in water heater rooms, and it's just, at this point, we've turned a bedroom into a closet to accommodate our clothing. And if we want to stay in the city and continue to invest in Canton, and we love the neighborhood, we love the street, it's really been the best.
So you bought the house in, was it 2013?
Correct.
Okay. When you bought the house, you knew what size it was and that it didn't have a basement, that it appears to just been built on the dirt.
Correct.
Okay.
And that was sufficient for, 2 people, but looking forward, we really want to raise a family in the city, in Canton, and it's just not going to be able to accommodate that change in lifestyle. And we really think it's in the city's master plan to try to grow 10,000 families, and we'd love to be one of them.
And also, at the time that you bought the house, did you envision staying in the house for such a long-term period of time?
Not initially, yeah.
And now you really would like to stay in the neighborhood, and so.
We love Baltimore City, we love the neighborhood, we just want to stay, but we're not sure how to do it in this property.
And to respond to the neighbors' concerns about the property value and their assessment of the reduction, to whatever extent they believe that they're going to lose their shade in their backyard, they're still going to have a roof deck. They'll have plenty of sunlight, and I think that those concerns are a little bit overstated. I think the testimony of Mr. Garano really makes clear that there's not one factor that anyone can attribute to a decline or decrease in property value. People look for different things. What one person's priority might be may be completely different from somebody else. And I think that we have competent testimony here that the proposed addition is not going to cause any kind of reduction in their property value.
I'm sorry, is that your conclusion, that it would not cause any?
I believe that was Mr. Garano's conclusion, but I obviously agree with him.
Let me ask again, what is the size? Did I hear 2,500 square feet?
No, it's 1,980.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, this, as Mr. Williams is pointing out to me, is not the, certainly not the first time the board would have considered a case like this with a corner property in Canton. The board routinely grants this type of variance, upon a finding that there's a unique condition that exists for these few properties that don't have, that aren't built out to the size of their full lot. There aren't many left in Canton, actually, and is shown by the map that Mr. Prettle passed around.
That is true, although the typical situation, there's not a opposing party who's contesting the conclusion whether or not, or the position as to whether or not the property is unique or that there's a hardship, et cetera, et cetera.
Perhaps, although as I understand their concerns, their concerns really relate to what they perceive to be a reduction in their property value, not necessarily that the property isn't unique. I haven't heard anything from them on that.
They, I think, questioned the A, hardship, and B, uniqueness.
I think what I heard was that they were questioning whether the additional space was a necessity, because in their view of the world, it isn't. I think, you know, our clients believe that they do need additional space, or their house doesn't have enough space for them to raise a family in. They'd love to stay in the neighborhood again. And, you know, if they can't make the house livable for them, then, you know, they'll end up moving to the county, and the city will lose another family that you know, really should be here.
Sort of a binary of a choice, like, oh, you know, if I can't make my house bigger, then I'm gonna leave. I mean, lots of people are in that similar situation, and what they do is they just simply sell the house they're in and they buy a new one that's bigger. And whether they find that within the city or somewhere else, certainly I hope that they would find it.
I can address that. My name is Elizabeth Klein. I'm the homeowner. So we've priced out those various options that you have recommended, such as digging out a
I haven't
basement.
recommended them, I'm just posing those
Pointing them
questions.
out, sure, let me clarify, that you've pointed out, and I appreciate that. We definitely priced out all of those options, and the option that we are proposing to the board today is the most financially sound option for us as a family. So most of those corner homes in Canton are going for sale prices that are well above what we could afford and what our current house would list at. Additionally, digging out a basement would be significantly more cost than our currently proposed addition. So to address those other options, this is what financially makes the most sense for us.
Over the past 2 years, we've seen almost our entire block turn over as people have had kids. Really, like, there's only one family that's still there from when we moved in.
She's written a letter of support as well.
Yes. But people who are trying to start families in the city find that the homes that could support a family, there's only a few of them. They're building a lot of multifamily, but they're not really building homes that can support families. And that sort of housing stock needs to be added to Canton. I mean, it exists in Roland Park or something like that, but it's well outside of, you know, the price range of a mid-30s couple.
Good afternoon. If I have one more thing to add, that based on some of the evidence that Ms. Hecker submitted, as well as the map, if there is any property in the Canton neighborhood or this area to be improved in this manner, it would be this particular property, due to the nature of corner lots as well as the characteristics of all the immediate intersections around. Theirs is the only one that does not cover the entire lot. And for them to be able to stay here, bring this property into, you know, basically conformance with the rest of the similar properties and similarly zoned lots. And this, you know, I couldn't think of a more proper candidate for this type of addition than this lot.
And just to piggyback on that, like we said earlier, this really is exactly what the uniqueness standard is, the variance standard is under the zoning code. It's a property that is unique. There are not other properties that are like this, and the unique factors are what create the hardship that drives the need for the variance.
And just so that we're all reading from the same hymnal here, 5308A approval standards says that A, in order to grant the variance, the zoning administrator, the board of municipal zoning appeals, or the city council, as the case may be, must find that because of the particular physical, here you're asserting shape, but also includes surroundings, topographical conditions of the specific structure or land involved. So that is because of that condition, an unnecessary hardship or practical difficulty, as distinguished from a mere inconvenience, would result if the strict letter of the applicable requirement were carried out. Other required findings are that the administrator or the zoning board or the city council, as the case may be, must also find that the conditions on which the application are based are unique to the property for which the variance is sought, and are not generally applicable to other property within the same zoning classification. So that uniqueness there is actually separated out from the hardship. It's not that the hardship and the uniqueness are the same. And here, what I'm saying is that what you've argued is that the property is at once unique because it's small and on a corner, and it's a hardship if it were to continue to be unique, i.e. that it would continue to be small.
It's a hardship because because of the size of the lot and the size of the existing structure, they can't build an addition on it without occupying the entire rear of the property, which is what requires the variance for the rear yard and lot coverage. Like, their lot is so tiny, and the location and size of the existing structure limit what can be constructed. So in order to expand their existing house in any fashion that'll be usable, basically to add one room on the rear on the first and second floors, because their lot is so small, they need the variances. If they had a bigger lot, they could build an addition of exactly the same size and perhaps not need a variance.
Although one thing that's not reflected in the drawings is what the interior layout is of the room. So there's I think in this zoning district, it's 80% lot coverage, and you're currently at 70, projecting to go to 100. So you've got, I guess, 10% there, which is not that much comparatively. Although, I guess, well, it'd have to be the size of the lot. Maybe you're looking at like 8 feet, something like that. It's 10%. So if you stayed within that, I mean, I guess what I'm trying to figure out is what could you accomplish as of right versus what versus what are you looking to achieve?
So in our conversations with the CCA, they indicated that they would not support anything that is a net detriment to off-street parking. So in order to maintain parking, we need to build a garage. Any sort of expansion that goes even 3 feet further would restrict our ability to park on it. So in order to fit a vehicle, it's kind of an all or nothing situation. That's proposed condition.
So I can submit this to the board. This is the interior layout, if you're interested in what the interior of the house looks like.
This is the existing floor plan?
Sure.
It shows the proposed addition.
Yeah, the existing floor plan, the house is bifurcated by a stairway that runs directly down the middle of the house coming up from the entrance. It was built by a 2006 era developer with, kind of some notably shady ties. So design wasn't a central consideration when he constructed it. It obviously could have been done a better way, given the size of the lot, but it was done in the cheapest possible way, at the expense of insulation and a number of other things that we've since cured. But
I think Mr. Klein's point is well made that, the Canton Community Association obviously is very sensitive to parking, and currently the property has a parking pad in the rear, and if we were to create an addition that was smaller than what's proposed, we wouldn't be able to park a car back there. It wouldn't be big enough to have the garage.
Well, you would probably be here asking for some sort of variance there.
Well, then we would be back to where we are.
That one, I think, I would posit would probably be more of the classic situation of the hardship, given that you'd be complying, you'd be doing what the code allows you to do, which is if you were building an as-of-right addition. But you said that Canton Community Association would approve that, would oppose that because they would feel that it would impinge on your available parking, which it might, but then that's just really given the overlapping of the two requirements. That is, well, not really requirements, but that you're allowed to have certain addition as of right, and that might compromise your parking. You'd look for a variance of that requirement. But that's not a situation which we have here. So, Anything else?
Anything else? All right, thank you.
Okay, thank you all.
Thank you all.
Thanks. All right, let's call a couple that we had no shows.
We need to finish this part of the record.
We've got this. We'll take the photos. And Ms. Hecker, make the floor plan part of the.
Oh, yes, please.
All right.
Got here late, I just wanted to tell you I'm here. 2018, 128 is the case.
That's, I'm about ready to call you, so have a seat.
All right, sorry about that.
That's all right.
I might have been called.
Sure. Calling case from our consent docket earlier, 2018-128, 6301 Efficiency Way, Rajan Tripathi.
Well, I'm not him, I'm work for him, sir.
All right. Okay, sir, can you identify yourself for the record?
My name is Stephen Poggi,
Okay, and sir, can you spell your last name?
P-O-G-G-I.
Okay. Mr. Poggi, we have this as an application to add carry-out food shop to existing gas station with convenience store. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
All right. Sir, would you please raise your right hand to be sworn?
Do you swear or affirm under the penalty of perjury that the answers that you give and the statements that you make be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
All right. Mr. Poggi, this case was on our consent docket. The consent docket consists of cases where the zoning board staff has already reviewed the files in these matters, and the board has been able to conclude that we have the ability to approve these cases on a consent basis. So there's no opposition that's signed in your case. Mr. Tiso, anything for the planning department?
Recommend approval.
Okay. And Mr. Poggi, was there anything you would like to offer to supplement the record in this case?
No, sir.
Okay. In that instance, zoning board staff, having previously reviewed the application, we've determined that there is sufficient information to approve your appeal. Good luck.
Okay, I ask you a question. We already have we've been through the plumbing, electrical, building, and health. The permit is ready, but, it was flagged because of this hearing. Now, how long would it take for this office to tell the permit office that it's okay to release a permit? Or how does that work?
Go through, I can't really give you advice or really a recommendation, but I can tell you, generally how the process works is that once you get your approval and the formal written disposition of your case should be forthcoming, and we tell people about 3 to 4 weeks, but more conservatively, what would you say, Mr. Baumgartner?
Right.
Okay. So once you have that in hand, then you can go on and get whatever other approvals that you would.
Okay.
Okay?
Thank you all. Appreciate it.
All right, also calling 2018-169, 4111 West Belvedere Avenue, Hal Arnold. Okay. I think that was all, so now we are off the record.